Let's turn back to the Gospel of Luke. We were on a very familiar parable last time as we had to stop, and that, of course, was found there in Luke chapter 16, verses 19 through 31. We were talking about the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. Now, one of the things about it is that it's been referred to as a parable by many. Jesus simply said there was a certain rich man and there was a beggar. His name was Lazarus. The important thing there is that many believe this to be they believe this to be a real story. This is not the Lazarus of John chapter 11. This is different. But they believe that this could have been a real story because proper names are not used in the parables by sort. I mean, when you think of them, by and large, there are never proper names that are listed. So to list this beggar's name, it's as if he were a real name. Now, some of you maybe have heard the name of the rich man. What has he been called traditionally? Dives. You ever heard that? Dives, because his name speaks of his wealth and what he has. And so that's what you may have heard that through the years. So as we think of this rich man, we think of the beggar. It talks about life. It talks about eternity. This beggar was poor. He had nothing. He's at the gates. His condition is so desperate that he's begging. He has open wounds and sores, boils that the dogs are licking. It's an awful putrid type of situation there. He's just desiring the crumbs that fall from the rich man's table, which may tell you a couple of things. He may not simply be desiring, but it was the only place that he got the scraps. So indeed, he may be eating those scraps that did fall. He was desiring, wanting them. He knew where to be. And so before we cross off the rich man as being someone who is totally unfeeling, his kitchen help could have thrown out that way, and he ate from that. But regardless, we find this, that he could not provide for himself here. But as it goes through chapter 16 here, what Jesus quickly gets to as he talks about this warning to them about the rich man and Lazarus, he says that the beggar died and he was carried into Abraham's bosom. Now, let me ask you a question. Why would he have been carried there? Was it because he was poor? Because he undoubtedly had been deemed faithful. He undoubtedly, in that type of, we'll say it Old Testament, we'll call it pre-cross type of righteousness, where righteousness was declared upon a person, they had to have exhibited something that meant that this is who this person was. That's the only way he would have been carried by the angels into Abraham's bosom, because when you think you think of Abraham's bosom, it is the half of Sheol, the realm of those who have died. In that day, that was, whether in the center of the earth, but when they died, they either went to Abraham's bosom or they went to Hades, the place of the damned, those who were in torments because they were not ready. So he was carried into Abraham's bosom, and we find that the rich man found his way there into hell, and it says immediately he was there and he was in torments. So the rich man died, he was buried, which means he probably had a very lavish funeral. A lot of things went his way, but the ultimate thing is they probably took the body of the Lazarus and put him in the town dump or trash heap, which has also been called Gehenna, because it likened it unto hell because it burned all the time with the trash that was thrown out there. So many times they would throw bodies, either if they were notable enough to get into the potter's field, then they could be just buried there as homeless or whatever may happen to have been. But it could have been that many of these were just thrown into the trash heap of the day, the town dump there in Gehenna. But it tells us two things. He was comforted, the beggar was comforted there But it says that the rich man died, and in hell he lifted up his eyes. So the thing it's giving you there is an immediate separation. This is the thing that we should all think about, and that is at the time of death, there's an immediate separation, and immediately that which was alive, that soul, is gone to one of two locations where we will be forever. Either it's in the realm of the blessed and saved, or it's in the realm of those that are damned for all of eternity, and nothing is going to change that. And so that was the case here. So we find in verse number 24 that finding himself there in hell, that he cried, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus that he may dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am tormented in this flame. Now that tells you a great deal right there. If you've ever seen beggars, if you've ever can imagine the condition of this particular person who is there, they're out on the streets, there's not exactly cleanliness. I can imagine that in life as he knew him, Lazarus was just that despised beggar that was at his gate. And so for him to ask for Lazarus to come, as his condition had always been, just to take that dip of water and put it on his tongue because he's tormented, was a literally reaching down as far as he could. He had to be terribly tormented when this was taking place. And so Abraham said to him, verse 25, Son, remember in your lifetime you received the good things, and likewise Lazarus evil things, but now he is comforted and you are tormented. And so he's saying it really doesn't matter about your station of wealth or lack thereof in this life. The only thing that matters is your personal righteousness before Jesus, before God, and of course ours today is based upon Jesus. And so he says, besides all this, in verse 26, there's a great gulf fixed between you and them, so that those who want to pass from here to you cannot, nor can those from there pass to us. So again, you've got this picture of Sheol, you've got the grave, you've got Hades on one side, you've got the bosom of Abraham on the other side, which we would call heaven. There's a great gulf. No one can go back and forth, but at least there are things that this is the temporary place, okay, in that day before the resurrection, and the holding place there before the cross. So keep it in your mind there when we talk about this. But there was this great gulf that was fixed. No one could pass over. It was impossible, impassable, as the case may happen to be. So then verse 27, it says, I beg you therefore, Father, that you would send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, that he may testify to them, lest they come to this place of torment. So he's even saying, Father, I've got all these brothers, and I don't want them to come to this place of torment. If somebody could warn them, maybe Lazarus, because he's got to the other side and the correct side, and I'm not. And Abraham said to him, they have Moses and the prophets, let them hear them. And he said, no, Father Abraham, but if one goes to them from the dead, they will repent. But he said to them, if they do not hear Moses and the prophets, neither will they be persuaded, though one rise from the dead. So the word that he's trying to get across to them here is that they're having their opportunity in this life. They have their opportunity to respond while there's life, while the heart is beating and blood is coursing through their veins. But once death takes place, it's final. There's no second chance. There's no additional opportunity. And those without Christ, as we know today, especially since the cross and resurrection, are hopelessly lost. And he was saying there that as we say, well, if they just do this or if they just do that, no, they're having their opportunities now. And that's why it's so imperative for us to make sure with family and friends and those we know that we know as much as we can where they stand, how they are living, so that we can help them in their way before it is everlastingly too late. So when he's talking about they would not respond in that particular way, just looking back at a couple of those scriptures found in, say, Hebrews 9:27, when it reminds us it's appointed unto man once to die, and after this the judgment. Hebrews 10:31, it's a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. It is that time when everything's sealed. And that's why one of the first things, if we're thinking correctly, when anyone dies, our first thought should be heaven or hell. Not that it's going to change anything, because it's sealed. That's why we can rejoice as believers, even sometimes in our sorrow of loved ones, that though they're not with us anymore, they're with the Lord, which is a far better thing, and we can rejoice. But for those who have died that we may miss as family members or friends or whoever they may happen to be, even a sports star or a Hollywood star, we have to feel for their eternity. You know, that maybe they had everything in this life like the rich man, but they've gone to an eternity that knows nothing of riches, and they're eternally separated from God. So Jesus is really pointing out here the necessity of making decisions while you can make them, the importance of being right with God while there's an opportunity to be right with God. All right, let's move on to the next parable found there in Luke chapter 17 in verses 7 through 10. Now, this is the parable about the unprofitable servant. Chapter 17, verses 7 through 10. He says there, as he's been talking about offenses and how they may come in life, don't, as you may sin against your brother and these kinds of things, he's teaching about what is our faith and duty in life. Okay? So, picking up there in verse number 7, he says, which of you, having a servant plowing or tending sheep, will say to him when he's come in from the field, come at once and sit down to eat? But will he not rather say to him, prepare me something for my supper, and gird yourself and serve me till I have eaten and drunk, and afterward you will eat and drink? Does he thank that servant because he did the things that were commanded him? I think not. So likewise, you, when you've done all those things which you are commanded, say, we are unprofitable servants. We have done what was our duty to do. So that's what Jesus is trying to get across here. Whether this particular servant may have been tending sheep, or whether he's plowing the field, or whatever the job may have been around the house of where he was employed, he's asking that question. Does that servant come in and the master say, well, come on in. I've got a table spread for you. No, he says, now it's your job after you've come in to prepare supper for me. And so when he's trying to push this, you say, well, boy, that's kind of a demanding boss. But in the same way, what he's trying to say is that the servant is only doing what he has been hired to do. It was his job. It was his duty to do that which he does. So he's saying here, even when he's bringing him something, does he thank that servant? Maybe not, because he is in the master's role. And he's really trying to impress here about duty. So he says, likewise here, we are that unprofitable servant. We're viewed in that particular way. We do that which is our duty. It's not that we are given special honor. Now, understand what he's saying here, that when we live the Christian life, how we walk before the Lord really is our duty. We will be rewarded, okay? We will at the judgment seat have rewards that will come our way. But how we live this day, while we're here going through this life of trials and tribulations, of sickness and sorrow and death, he's still saying, that is your duty. As it was with those who came before you, it is the plight of all mankind on this earth, and it's simply your duty. Micah asked that question one day, what is the whole duty of man? But to love the Lord your God and to walk humbly before Him and to love with mercy and grace. That was the promise and what He had said to him about that. So in that particular way, when He's giving this, He's saying it's our duty. You say, well, I don't like to look at it in that particular way. I'd kind of like to look at it in the way of saying, we're friends of Jesus, and we want to walk with Him, and He's our master, and He loves us. Understand that. But when we look on the other side of that, it's this. We serve Christ because of the cross and because of what He's done for us, and it's just simply our duty to do what we're doing. And so, like doing that which we may be paid for, we certainly haven't been having our sins forgiven, having an eternal home waiting in heaven, giving the peace and satisfaction we have now. We don't just serve Him so that we can load up on things that will come our way, different types of rewards. We serve Him because it's our duty to serve Him. We want to serve Him, amen? We want to serve our Master. And so he's putting that to us now, and we know that we're not here serving Him thinking, well, God's indebted to us because we actually even came on Wednesday night. He's going to look more favorable to us. It does speak volumes to Him, but it's just our duty as we all look at that tonight to be here. The servant of God seeks to obey his Father's commands. We don't question, as any servant would not question his master. Why did God say this? I wonder why God expects us to do that. Do you walk around saying that? Or that you just follow the great teaching of ours is not to reason why, it's but to do or die. We follow His commands because He said so. And it's our duty to follow Him. So we're never getting in a position to where we're putting God in our debt, that He owes us something. We never can have any claim from God in that particular way. Sometimes somebody will make that statement, well, if this person, the way they lived, if they didn't make it to heaven, then we don't have a chance. Almost putting God on the spot saying, well, if they didn't make it to heaven, well, if they knew Jesus, then of course they'll be there. But if it was just good works, they won't. Okay? When we have done our very best for the Master, we have only done our duty. A song in the old Broadman hymnal is entitled, Our Best. We want to give our best to the Master. We sing that great song at times, that hymn that says, were the whole realm of nature mine, that were a present far too small. Love so amazing, so divine, demands my soul, my life, my all. That's how we should feel. It's just our duty, and it's our privilege to serve Him. If nothing, if there were nothing waiting, and this life is not a waste, we serve Him because He loves us. So again, Micah 6:8, what is the whole duty of man but to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God. All right, let's try to start on at least one more, and that is in Luke 18, verses 1 through 8. We're getting toward the home stretch on these. We could finish up next week, depending, so let's see where we get on this. Now, this is much like the persistence of the man coming at midnight, and he was wanting a loaf of bread because he had company, and he was supposed to be offering that to his company who had just showed up. And he said, man, you're going to wake up my family. And, he says, I understand that, so just give me a loaf of bread. I got to have something out for these people who've just come in to be the proper host in that particular way. So that persistence that's there, it's kind of like that one as we come to this particular parable about the persistent widow. It's chapter 18, verses 1 through 8. And he spoke a parable to them that men ought to always pray and not lose heart. So he's talking about the persistence of prayer. Don't lose heart because there's not an immediate answer or there's not an answer as you want it, but in due time, God will answer. So in verse 2 it says, saying, there was in a certain city a judge who did not fear God nor regard man. And now there was a widow in that city, and she came to him saying, get justice for me from my adversary. And he would not for a while, but afterward he said within himself, though I do not fear God nor regard man, yet because this widow troubles me, I will avenge her, lest by her continual coming she weary me. And the Lord said, hear what the unjust judge says. And let me just stop right there. I don't want to get verses 6 through 8 first. So here's this unjust judge. He is not a judge that is a believer. He has no regard for God. He has no real care. He just happens to be in this almost paid for position that he has. And so he really doesn't have to care for a person. He's supposed just to do what he wants to do, how he wants to do it. He certainly doesn't have a regard for God. He doesn't have any type of feeling for God. So it's said that this person could not have been a Jew because he would have had regard for God. He would have loved God. He would have served God and realized that he answers before God. So he's obviously not a Jewish judge. He's just a paid type of magistrate. And so he's one of these that also, as many of them do, receive bribes. And you go to a foreign country, many times they will stop you to this and detain you just so that you will give a bribe. Much like happened to me in Moscow when the missionary had to pay something. Anyway, we won't go into that. So it's the fact that they want to bribe. The officers even there, some of those will pull cars over to the side just to get a bribe from them, which they would pocket. So if a plaintiff, this widow lady, did not have something to pay him, then she probably had no hope that she would ever be heard. So she was persistently coming before the judge, please take action against my adversary. I have no hope. I have no hope. I have no hope. I have no hope. Please take action. Please take action. And finally, though he had no regard for man or God, he said, this woman is wearing me out. Literally, what it says there in the original is she's giving me a black eye. That's what it says. So she is beating me up, her persistence. And so I'm going to give her some peace of heart so I can get some peace of mind and peace in my life. And that's how her constant pleading. He says that she exhausts me, gives me a black eye. So the judge his resistance was breaking down, even though she couldn't pay, even though he could care less about her. It was the constant noise that just kept him. It was like fingernails on the chalkboard, and he said, enough of this. So he had no compassion, no reverence for God, but yet he hears her. So pick up in verse 6. So this is the contrast. Not that God is like that, but literally that our God is much different than that. In contrast, he is a loving God who wants to hear from us. Verse 6. So the Lord said, hear what the unjust judge said, and shall not God avenge his own elect who cry out day and night to him, though he bears long with them? So, though this judge finally gave in, our God is not like this unjust judge. He wants us to come before him. He wants to hear from us. He asks us to boldly approach the throne of grace that he can meet us in our hour of need. And so, he is trying to say this, I am the loving Father that will be there to hear and to answer in what is going to be best. I tell you that he will avenge them speedily. Have you found that God always answers speedily? It's speedily to him, but not necessarily to us. God takes his sweet time, right? You can agree with that. That's not being blasphemous. He takes his own time because he knows what's best. How many of you as parents have not given in to what your children asked for the first time they asked for it? Daddy, I know I'm only 5, but I want the keys to the car. Did you give it to them? No, it was at least 11 years before they could have the keys to the car. You did that for their good. How much more God, though it's speedily in the fact that He knows, He hears, and He answers, it's just that it's not always on our timing when things are going to take place, and so He's going to answer in what He sees to be best. So He knows what like the child who asks for something, that parent knows what's going to be best for that child. Our Father knows even more so what's best for us, because that Father cannot see what's good for us in the future, and our God can. He knows what's good for us a day from now, a week from now, a month, a year, an eternity from now, and so He's answering accordingly. So we come before Him in persistence, and especially recognizing the prayer saying, but your will be done. God, do what you see to be best. I personally ask for this, but Lord, you do what you see to be best. God understands our troubles, our afflictions. He's deeply moved, and He will avenge us in time. So He ends up with this one final question. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man comes, will He really find faith on the earth? What's He asking? He's simply asking, will He find the children there? We know times will go worse and worse, and mankind will become more and more lost percentage-wise. There was a time in this country in the Great Awakening where 1 million were saved in a country of 30 million. But it becomes less and less Christian. The world becomes less and less Christian, not more. And that's just those who profess to be Christian. And so, will He find faith? Will He find us still asking? Will He find us still wanting? Will He find us still serving Him out of duty? Will He find us being who we should be? And so that's the question that He's asking here. And Daniel did so. When Daniel wanted an answer from God, he fasted and prayed for 21 straight days, and God answered his prayer. He sent an angel to give him an answer. All right, so we finished it, and it's time for us, we're out of time, so it's time for us to get loose so that the choir can go and rehearse. And we'll pick up on thinking what might be the last 2 or 3 parables next week. All right, let's stand together. Let's have us close in a word of prayer. Steve Wild, how about praying for us, please?